Hi everyone, I'm Mike from Lanzarote Information and welcome to another Lanzarote history video for you. Now those of you who've watched my videos regularly will know I occasionally mention the fact that the town of San Antonio in Texas has a very strong Lanzarote connection. And today I'm going to explain what that connection is, how it came about, and the history of the city of San Antonio in Texas, because it's so wrapped up in the history of Lanzarote and also has so many parallels with the history of Lanzarote. Now, in the 17th and 18th centuries, a lot of Lanzaroteños decided to emigrate from the island. Lanzarote was suffering from a desperate water shortage. It was really hard to grow crops. In the meantime, they were seeing sailors going to and coming back from the Americas who were telling stories of, what was going on there and the fact that it was a land of great opportunity. So many of the local people would just jump on a ship basically, or pay for a fare on a ship to go to the New World and try and start a new life for themselves over there. And Lanzaroteños and Canarians in general populated many of the places in that region of the world. The Dominican Republic, for example, much of South America, and we're focusing today on North America and San Antonio. So in 1718, a group of 56 settlers, of whom 48 were from the island of Lanzarote, founded a new town in the state that we now know as Texas. And they founded their new town on the site of what had been a Payaya Indian encampment on the 1st of May 1718. And they founded a mission there, and the mission was named after San Antonio de Valera, hence the name San Antonio. What was the mission eventually became known as the Alamo. And of course that's a whole other story, but not one for this video. But many families who live in San Antonio today can trace their roots back to those first 48 people from Lanzarote. And the names that we find so common here, like Cabrera and Curbelo, are very common in San Antonio too. So San Antonio was on the banks of a river, and it became successful, if you like, as a town because it was a great stopping point for people heading towards the Rio Grande. So the big wagon trains that were heading across the country would often stop in this burgeoning town of San Antonio. So that's an incredible symmetry with what was going on in Lanzarote, which was very much a stopping point between the old world and the new world. Well, San Antonio was kind of providing the same services. So the wagon trains would stop to fill their water up from the river, and they would buy stuff from the shops that had been set up by the local people to sell their goods and food and chattels and horses and whatever else that were needed by the wagon trains in that time. They did suffer, the townspeople really did suffer from attacks by the Native Americans, who they would have called Indians in that time, the Comanche particularly, and the Apaches. And in 1793 they built a fort to defend the town and put an army of men into that fort to protect them all from the raids of the Indians. And again, this has an amazing symmetry with Lanzarote, because in the same period the people who'd stayed behind in Lanzarote were suffering attacks from pirates, and they too were building fortifications in order to protect themselves from the pirates. For sure, it was a dangerous time wherever you were in the world. So we move on just over 100 years from the founding of San Antonio. We move on to 1821. And at this point, San Antonio incorporates itself into and becomes part of the Mexican Republic of Texas. And indeed, it was the seat of government of that region of Texas. So we probably all think of Texas as that most American of states, but actually in this period, as recently as the 1820s, Texas was very much part of Mexico. It was part of Spain effectively, because they had significant control over Mexico. But Mexico themselves were in this period seeking to have independence from Spain, and they were fighting hard to separate themselves from the old mother country and become a country in their own right. So whilst Mexico was distracted trying to extricate itself from Spanish rule and control, the leader of the American part of Texas, a man named Stephen Austin, but he wasn't the $6 million man, decided that he wanted to take control of San Antonio. And he moved about 300 American families into San Antonio and declared it to be the part of the American state of Texas. He also moved American troops into the garrison and effectively took over the town with sheer numbers of people. Now, this prompted an attack in 1835 by Mexican troops in which they laid siege to the American troops in the Alamo and eventually ended up massacring them. So it was a really bloody period in the history of San Antonio. Eventually, San Antonio passed peacefully into American control and became part of the great state of Texas, part of the United States of America. And by the 1850s, it was the largest city in Texas. And it grew really fast to a population of around 2,500. And that was largely because it was at the head of the famous Chisholm Trail, which was the trail that all the cattle were herded onto to create the United States meat market. Now, San Antonio suffered very badly from a worldwide pandemic that was going on in the 1800s, and that was cholera. And the population dwindled quite dramatically during this period because a lot of people died. And it was reinforced by a big influx of German immigrants who decided that Texas and San Antonio were very much a place that they could settle and help to rebuild, and they did. So these two immigrant communities, the original Spanish community and the German community, worked side by side to build San Antonio up into the city it is today. And San Antonio has very strong military connections. Through the First World War and the Second World War, it became a major training and logistics hub for the United States Army. And that massively increased the population as lots of workers came in to support those operations. And even today, San Antonio is the headquarters of the United States Fifth Army. So what about today? San Antonio is a city with a population of 1.5 million people, making it the 12th most populous in the United States, and in Texas, second only to Houston. Around 60% of that population is Hispanic, and most of the population is bilingual in English and Spanish. San Antonio describes itself as a Tex-Mex city, being only 240 miles from the border with Mexico. And bear in mind, Texas is absolutely huge, so 240 miles isn't very big in terms of the size of the state. Lots of original buildings still exist there, the Spanish governor's residence, and of course the Alamo. And San Antonio has also become a bit of a cattle hub. So these days it's all about cattle and the military. And where they've had a lot of growth in the last 10 years has been with high-tech companies and fintech companies, because they have a very generous tax revenue system for companies, basically ultra-low taxation. And San Antonio really retains its ties with Lanzarote. In the center of the city, there is a monument to the original families that came over from Lanzarote, and there are statues of them wearing what we know as traditional Canarian clothing. They're in the process of building a museum there to those original settlers. And Lanzarote is twinned with San Antonio now, so our government officials regularly visit there, and their government officials regularly come to Lanzarote for meetings and updates and to catch up on anything that's changing between the two cities. So there you go, that's the story of San Antonio. I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed it, please give us a like. If you've got a question about it or a comment or any feedback, just leave it in a comment below. I read every single one of them and I'll be happy to answer it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Bye.